Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go could pass Twitter in active daily users.
It's a viral phenomenon.
But there is a bit of a darker side here.
Niantic, not going to do anything.
I've not met anybody. I've met no Pokemon friends yet.
Well, what is next for this game?
Remember those days back in 2016, running around with not a care in the world trying to catch a Snorlax? Well, for that, we can all say thanks to Pokemon Go. You see, when Pokemon Go first released, it actually broke 5 world records in just 1 month. In the first month, this game became the highest grossing mobile video game, gaining $206.5 million in 1 month. It also became the most downloaded game in the first month with 130 million downloads. It topped the chart at #1 mobile game in 70 different countries, became the highest revenue generating game in 55 different countries, and it was the fastest mobile game to reach a grossing revenue of $100 million, which it achieved in just 20 days. But the question stands, where has this game gone since then? Well, the game has not been as successful as it once was in 2016. And it was all because of one thing. But to understand that thing, we first need to go back to the beginning. Thursday, September 2015, the Pokemon Company hosted a press conference to announce the new spin-off game known as Pokemon Go, a never-before-seen mobile game that allows anyone to become a real-life Pokemon trainer. And to create this idea into reality, the Pokemon Company and Nintendo partnered with Niantic Labs in developing the project. While some question the concept of an augmented reality video game, as well as what the microtransactions would look like, a large majority of the Pokemon community were excited to experience the beloved franchise in the real world. The possibilities were endless, but could Pokemon and Niantic Labs make it a success?
We're back now with something that may explain any odd behavior you've seen on the streets recently. The smash hit mobile game app Pokemon Go has only been out for a few days, but it's already got millions following their smartphones to the most random places.
It all started on July 6, 2016, when Pokemon Go was finally released to the public. And overnight, Pokemon Go became a viral sensation. Combining a super popular franchise, Pokemon, and bringing it to the real world, where trainers could create the adventures of their own, was a smash hit. It generated millions of downloads and dollars to the Pokemon Company and literally saved Niantic's stock price. The app was so popular it crashed a lot. The servers could not handle the enormous scale of players playing the game. Combine that with the in-game bugs and glitches, and the lack of new content made the game not very replayable. As summer ended, the hype slowly died off, and the player base declined as well. Specifically, heading into winter of 2016, the active player base dropped by 26 million trainers. That is a lot of people to stop playing. At this point, Niantic had to do something fast if they wanted to keep their overnight success a long-term success. So in early 2017, they released Generation 2, a whole new generation to the game. But this was just the beginning. They also dropped legendary Pokemon, shiny Pokemon, and in-game weather that would change depending on the weather outside. They also held their first in-person event that we now know as Go Fests. Go Fests are a large-scale event where trainers would fly across the world to specific locations to meet up with other trainers and get access to some exclusive in-game features. It involved thousands of players, usually all crowding up into one park. So, what could go wrong?
Please help me welcome to the stage the CEO of Niantic, Mr. John Hankey.
This is obviously not the way that we had the day planned.
We'll be offering refunds for those that have been here today.
The first one was a historic disaster. Niantic didn't plan for the player base showing up, and there ended up being so many cell tower traffic issues in which too many people were trying to pull internet to play the mobile game. Ended up being that no one could log in or even take advantage of the event, and goes down in history as one of the worst events Pokemon Go has ever tried to pull off. Unfortunately, none of it was enough to stop the dropping numbers. Between 2016 and 2017, the game dropped over $250 million in revenue, and the active player base dropped 167 million players. To this day, the biggest drop Pokemon Go has ever seen. Now, to make it back, Niantic needed to make some money, because without money nowadays, unfortunately, you can't do much. And there are 3 ways Niantic generally does make money in Pokemon Go. Number 1, in-app purchases. You buy something in the game, and Niantic will get a cut from this because obviously it's their game. However, the Pokemon Company also takes a cut, as well as the app store that you have the game downloaded from does take a cut as well. So overall, Niantic is not taking all the money from the in-app purchases. Number 2, sponsored Pokestops. Different companies can go to Niantic Niantic and say, hey, we want to buy a bunch of exclusive Pokestops in your video game. Pokestops are things that people will go to and spin to collect items and different things like that. So having one on location at your company will motivate trainers to go to your store, spin that Pokestop, and who knows, maybe buy a thing or two when they're there. Pokemon Go has had plenty of sponsored deals in the past. They have things like Circle K, McDonald's. They even had one with Gucci, in which they would all get their own exclusive sponsored stops or gyms. But number 3, and the sneaky one no one really thinks about, geolocation data. Nowadays, every company needs to advertise to stay in the game, and Niantic can sell a lot of information to advertisers to make a lot of money. When you have your phone and you're playing Pokemon Go and you're walking around, Niantic is actually tracking that geolocation data and where you're going and what your habits are. It can then go ahead to advertisers and give them all that information, which they can use to help advertise to you properly. Say you end up going to visit the Gucci store, you may end up seeing a Gucci ad on your phone later that day. Now, how much revenue Niantic gets from each of these income streams is hard to say because all that information is kept at Niantic headquarters and kept to the company privately. But if Niantic wanted Pokemon Go to be a long-term success, they need to get one of these 3 income sources generating some revenue. So in 2018, Niantic had a plan to start getting that revenue back up, and it all involved in-app purchases. You see, Niantic can't really ask people to walk more so they can sell more data, or it's really hard to go and pitch companies to buy sponsored stops in their video game. But they sure as heck can bombard the game with content, almost forcing people to buy incubators, lucky eggs, raid passes, and other in-game items that will help them along their adventure. And so it began. From community days being introduced to generation 4 and 5, new shiny Pokemon, research tasks being added, Alolan variants, 7-kilometer eggs, GoFest Chicago, shiny legendaries, PvP, and more, 2018 was the year of the content overload. Niantic's plan was to bombard the game and make it one of the most active event games in the world so that trainers always had something to do or spend on in the game. And they knew this was their future. After recovering $230 million of revenue in 2018 and 65 million players, the future was looking bright for the game. So like everyone in America would say, more is better. And Niantic agreed. So in 2019, they kept shoving content down everybody's throat. They dropped lucky trades, avatar poses, Team Go Rockets. They held 3 GoFest events, introduced limited research days, more legendary Pokemon, roaming legendaries, and Niantic's new revenue idea, paid event tickets. They really love to use that one nowadays. In 2019, Niantic was able to get their player base backed up to a respectable 113 million and gain $890 million of revenue in that year. Niantic was flying high on top of the world and saw a bright future for the game until something no one was expecting happened.
Fast-breaking developments in the coronavirus emergency in the U.S.
Coronavirus in the U.K.
Overseas, the situation there is already very serious.
I know there's so much anxiety out there.
Major cities across the country are looking more like ghost towns.
The deadly virus known as COVID-19 was taking over the earth. And for a game that requires people to get outside and meet people, Niantic was scared. In the year 2020 alone, because of this virus, Niantic saw a huge drop-off of 30 million players deciding to put down Pokemon Go. And well, for revenue, well, it went up.
What? What the fuck?
You see, when COVID happened, Niantic knew it was the end for them unless they did something about it. So for the first time in the history of Pokemon Go, Niantic decided to go against their company motto. We believe humans are happiest when the virtual world leads to a physical one. Since the debut of Pokemon Go, Niantic has always been pushing for people to get outside, meet friends, and allow a video game like Pokemon Go to bring you out into the real world instead of sitting at home on your computer. But when the pandemic happened, Niantic decided to release accessibility features that would both save the game, but also kill it at the same time. And it all started with Pokestop spin distance. Niantic buffed the distance you could spin a Pokestop from 40 meters all the way until 80 meters. This was not all they were gonna buff. They introduced remote raid passes, allowing trainers to raid from anywhere and invite their friends from anywhere. They introduced Go Battle League, allowing trainers to battle from anywhere. They had 6-hour community days, allowing trainers to have more flexibility in playing the community day, as well as avoid big groups. They had events with 40-kilometer trade distance in which you could trade with your friends from far away. They added level 50, they added Mega Pokemon, they added global GoFest events that you could play from anywhere in the world, and much, much more. It was truly a time to play Pokemon Go because you could play the game how you wanted from anywhere and allowed huge flexibility in the player base. And trainers loved it. It was truly a monetizing miracle and made Niantic bounce completely back. All these changes actually allowed Niantic to double the valuation of their company from $4 billion in 2019 to $9 billion in 2021. Niantic made almost $500 million less dollars in 2016 compared to 2020 and 2021. And the final revenue Niantic pulled during the pandemic was over $2.4 billion. Now, all around this time, Niantic started to understand one important thing, and it was that a huge reason Pokemon Go had been so successful is because of the franchise, Pokemon. So Niantic decided in 2019 to try to put their eggs not all in one basket. And so they launched what I like to call the cemetery of Niantic games. It all started with Harry Potter Wizards Unite, which was a similar AR-based game on Harry Potter. It is now shut down. Then came a Catan game, World Explorers, a video game based on the popular board game Settlers of Catan. It's shut down now as well. We then have Transformers Heavy Metal. It is now shut down, until Niantic finally got a second place runner in 2021. Pikmin Bloom, the flower game based on the popular franchise Pikmin, was released in 2021 and is now the second highest revenue generating game for Niantic. Niantic was really happy for this, so they continued to push more games that they'd hope would have some success. We had NBA All World dropped in 2023, and also a Marvel-based Niantic game. And this all led up to them deciding to create their own IP, Peridot, in which they own the rights to everything in that game, so they're not really pulling from other franchises. Now, although these games are still running, I still see them all as failures. And the reason I think that is because all of these games combined, the revenue they generate does not even adequate to 1/24 of the revenue Pokemon Go brings in per month. I believe Pokemon is literally the perfect IP for Pokemon Go because it's what Pokemon truly is, an adventure that you go on to catch magical creatures around the world. How does NBA have anything to do with a GPS game? Now, they do have their new game Peridot, which may have some success in the future, but I believe you have to have some truly unique ideas to make a video game about cute creatures in 2023. Almost everything's been done. Anyways, back to Pokemon Go. Now, while Niantic has had their highest revenue year in 2020, this all came with downsides. Because these changes pulled in plenty new players who could now play Pokemon Go who really couldn't before because there was no accessibility features. And these trainers were expecting to be treated fairly like all other trainers. But Niantic did not have the same plan. So as announced, in 2021, Niantic started to remove all of these bonuses and features from the game, starting with Pokestop spin distance, bringing it back down to 40 meters. Trainers were frustrated about this. A boycott was organized, leading to the hashtag #HearUsNiantic trending to #1 on Twitter to get the company to listen. And this really wasn't the first time the player base didn't feel listened to. You see, over the years and years, and despite the high revenue from customers, Niantic consistently ignored players' feedback and always made the sole purpose of every action they take to get people outside. And while it is a noble cause, video game developers should still take feedback from their player base. And to the player base's surprise, they did. In 2021, Niantic released a statement saying that they understand Pokestop distance was a great feature and will keep it. They also promised to have more communication with the player base. However, from a corporation that size, promises are generally left empty. Because over the next 2 years, Niantic continued to remove all of the other pandemic bonuses from the game. They put community days back to 3 hours. They removed all the events with 40-kilometer trade distance. They nerfed the global GoFest events, allowing people to play GoFest from everywhere. And finally, in April of 2023, Niantic drastically increased the price of remote raids and limited it to 5 remote raids per day. Niantic pretty much added a bunch of features for players to play Pokemon Go during the pandemic, but then removed those features no matter how good or bad the feedback for those features was. And since the day of the remote raid nerf, the community has been furious. There's been a petition with over 100,000 signatures signed in hopes to revert these changes. The hashtag #HearUsNiantic also trended back up to #1 on Twitter. The game lost roughly 400,000 players in the month of April, and it was reported that April 2023 was Pokemon Go's lowest revenue generating month since 2018, only generating $34.7 million. Now, this claim was later rejected by a Niantic spokesperson, and they said, "We generally don't comment on third-party estimates of our revenue as they're often incorrect," which is the case here. Our revenue so far in 2023 is up on last year. We don't focus on the month-to-month trends because they fluctuate based on major live events. And it is important to note here that the month-to-month revenues are based on third-party sources and may not be completely accurate. However, the claim here does not decline that the revenue in April is still low compared to months, even if the overall yearly revenue is up on last year. The changes just came into effect anyway, so you wouldn't really see a drop in revenue. Now that leads us here to today. With almost every Niantic social media post across all of their games having hundreds to thousands of comments of people wanting Niantic to revert the changes, the online morale for Pokemon Go is at an all-time low. But that's just from my perspective. You can still find comments of some people saying that their local communities are prospering, and some people are really enjoying Pokemon Go again now that the game is back to what it once was pre-pandemic. Everyone really lives in their own little bubble and only sees different parts of the picture. So while for some, these changes are disastrous, for others, it's actually a good thing for them. So it's really hard to tell what the future of Pokemon Go is like. All we really have to predict the future of the game is the numbers, and right now the numbers are not really saying much. Will the game slowly die off over the next couple of years because of the low morale and ignorance of the player base by Niantic? Or will the game prosper like it was doing pre-pandemic? We don't really know. But what we do know is one thing. Over the years, Niantic and their game Pokemon Go, they've had one idea and one motto they always follow. We believe humans are the happiest when their virtual world leads to a physical one. Niantic's unwavering commitment to this motto has potentially led to the success of Pokemon Go, but it could also be the reason the video game fails in the coming years. Because at the end of the day, Niantic really only has two options. Stick to what makes them unique, even though it means potentially not listening to their player base, or prioritize the desires and feedback of their community above all else. It's a fine line every video game has to walk. And will Niantic successfully do that or not? Only time will tell. I'd love to hear you guys' perspective about this, so let me know in the comment section below. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. It took a lot of effort to make, so hit the like button. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.